Okay, here's the new Rene charger. I'm calling it these brass nuts and bolts coming out of the top. I have really thick hobby store noodle wire to hook to the battery. Here's where you hook up the power supply, the DC power supply from 18 to 24. Lid up here and pull it apart. And the whole idea is you can put oil in here. These jars are made to contain liquid, so it should be really watertight, so if it gets hot you can put oil in it. So here's the circuit board, heat shrinked around it. Here's a long coil here, heat shrink. Then I connect to those brass bolts and nuts up there. Here's the core material right here. It's about an inch long, about an inch wide, 1/4 inch thick through the middle. I stack 6 of them together, and then I wind one layer of 24 gauge all the way along here, as tight as I can. And that is the first layer of power wind, and after that I wind bifilar 2 24s, so one is the trigger wind that hooks to the gate of the transistor, and then the other half is the continuation of the power wind, let's say. So there's actually 155 feet on the coil here, 155 feet of wire. That's the power wind, and then there's 94 feet of trigger wind that hooks to the gate of the transistor. Here's the little circuit board. Here's a 3552 transistor in here. They're rated at 600 volts and 25 amps, and they are also made for really high frequencies. I think they're a lot better than a 3055. So there's the transistor, there's the gate over here, and here's the wire that goes to the gate. Here's a 330 ohm resistor. And these are those diodes, 25 amp, 600 volt diodes that are ultra fast. Can't remember their number right now. Here's the back side. I put heat shrink over this wire, so where it overlaps, like right there, there's not going to be any chafing or anything. It's pretty simple. Okay, here's 61 feet of 24 gauge wire wound on that core. Here's what it looks like before, and then I put one layer as tight as I can, wound it by hand. I also coated it with epoxy, the wire, before I wound it up. And so this is the 61 feet of the first layer of power winds. Now from here on I'll do bifilar for 94 feet. Okay, here's the finished coil. I started winding from up here. So this is the beginning of the power wind. So I did that first layer all the way down here. And then I started doing the bifilar. So this one is the start of the trigger wind. I know that. I know that this is the start of the power wind. I wound right hand rule, looking down, going this way. So these two wires in the middle, one of these is the power wind, one's the trigger wind. So I have this hooked up to this beginning of the power wind, and we'll see which one it is. If I put it here, I scraped off the ends with sandpaper, the varnish of the wire, and I have a little bit of solder on there. So it's not that one because the ohm meter says nothing. So I put it on here. It should be around 4.5 ohms. There it is. Okay, so this one is the power wind. This one right here. This is the trigger wind. So this should read about 2.5 ohms because it's a shorter length of wire, the trigger wind. It's only 94 feet. And there it is, it's going down about 2.7. So here's the trigger wind, here's the power wind. Now when I hook it up, I have this one go to the transistor. So if you study the Rene's charger circuit, this power wind here goes to the transistor. And then where the trigger wind and the power wind connect together, I have this power wind that comes out of here, goes down to the beginning here. So I have the end of the power wind connect to the beginning of the trigger wind, if that makes any sense. But basically, these two go together right here. So and this leftover one goes to the gate, goes to that 330 ohm resistor, and it goes to the gate. So these two connect. This goes directly to the ground of the battery that's being charged. If you study the circuit, this goes to the transistor, the beginning of the power wind, so the two connected together goes to the ground of the battery, and the trigger wind left over, that goes to the gate of the transistor through a 330 ohm resistor.